He has to double as hair, makeup, wardrobe.
Yeah, because in 1970s, you most focus on about Gombe, about your chimpanzee study. Then suddenly you jump out to carry the bigger world.
That was in 1986.
Yeah. So what happened?
What happened was that the big book that I wrote, The Chimpanzees of Gombe, which took about 2 years to write, and it was all the first 20 years research. And then one of my friends in America, who was head of the Chicago Academy of Science, he said, we should celebrate this with a conference. So he wanted a conference about the great apes, and including paleontology. I went to the conference. So I went as a scientist, really thinking I'd probably spend the rest of my life at Gombe, and left as an activist. It just like that. And at that conference we had a session on conservation, and it was shocking seeing, everywhere where people were studying chimps, the numbers were going down and the forests were being destroyed. But I didn't quite know what to do. So got some money, visited the chimp sites, realized what was happening, why they weren't decreasing in number, but learned about the problems faced by the African people. Learned why. People say, was it a tough decision? It wasn't a decision, it's something that happened.
So during the transition, what's the biggest obstacle you have to overcome?
Well, for me, the most important was alleviating poverty, so that the people found ways of making a living without destroying their environment. And they realized then that saving the environment wasn't just for wildlife, but for their own future. Reaching the tipping point in 5 years. That doesn't mean it's all over in 5 years. It means it will be very, very hard to slow down climate change if we don't take action now. I'm getting older, there's less time and so much to do.
The sense of urgency. When started, the sense of urgency become more pressing?
Oh, I think it's come gradually, don't you? Gradually over the last 10 years, maybe 20. The species disappearing, the climate heating up, the frequency of hurricanes and storms and floods and droughts, the conflict around the world, the civil unrest. I mean, all of it is, and people losing hope.
When did you first realize that hope is so important? Way
back in late 1980s, when I was meeting young people who said they were depressed or they were angry, and that's because they said we compromised their future and there was nothing they could do about it. So yes, we've compromised their future, but I reckon there was something they could do. And then it all became very clear that if you lose hope, you become apathetic, you give up, you do nothing, and then we're doomed.
So for you, for the past 5 decades, the world become better or worse?
Worse. On the other hand, awareness has grown up, particularly among young people. They're much more aware of the need to. But unfortunately, in some of the very elite communities, like I won't mention places, but children growing up with very rich parents who just swan around private jets and everything. Those children, they don't know. They don't realize the harm that lifestyle is doing to the planet. So getting to them is important. Equally, it's important to get to the very poor, to, somehow give them some hope.
So when deal with the politician or business leader, what did you get from them? How do they think about the world?
Well, the business leaders, I talk to them quite often. And some of them, without question, are really, really trying to become more sustainable. And my favorite story is a CEO of a big international company. And he said, Jane, I really have been trying for the last 8 years to get my company sustainable in the countries where we get our products, in the supply chain as much as possible. That's difficult. In our offices around the world, and in the way we treat our customers. And he said there were 3 reasons. 1, seeing the writing on the wall. We're using up natural resources in some places faster than nature can replenish them. 2, consumer pressure. People are beginning to ask questions. How was this made? Did it harm the environment? Was it cruel to animals, like factory farming? Is it cheap because of unfair wages? But he said, what tipped the balance for me was my little girl, 10 years old, and she got back from school. She said, Daddy, they're telling me what you're doing is hurting the planet. That's not true, is it, Daddy? Because it's my planet. That did it.
Very touching.
You see, that's how you have to go. You have to reach the heart. It's no good trying to argue and fight because they're not going to listen, these people. But if you can sneak into the heart, but how do we persuade governments? How do we persuade business? They don't seem to care. Oh, I'll be all right. I'll be dead before it gets too bad. But don't you care about your children? Oh, I hadn't thought about that. Well, it may never happen. You know, I mean, I heard with my own ears, President-elect Donald Trump said, climate change is the biggest hoax in human history. He said that.
Yeah.
And he's going to be president. And his chief advisor will be Elon Musk. Elon Musk is the only person who's attacked me on social media because when I'm talking about the problems we face, I always say to have unlimited economic development on a planet with finite natural resources and a growing human population doesn't make sense. We've got 8 billion of us roughly on the world today. By 2050 it'll be about 10 billion. What's going to happen? I've never said more than that. And Elon Musk accused me of wishing for human genocide on social media. He's going to be the main advisor to Donald Trump. I mean, what do you do? And then all these political leaders, they all get together and they make their little plans and it's like I'm reminded in Shakespeare's, we petty men creep under their huge legs and peep about to find ourselves dishonorable graves. And so I just thought, that's exactly what it's like.
So many people feel so powerless.
Yes. Makes the job of somebody like me very difficult. And still, I must give hope, because if people lose hope now, then of course we can't do anything about it.
But in 1930s, 40s, it's more harsher than now, I guess. The World War II.
What was I, 10, 11, 12, the end of the war. And the images of the Holocaust came out, the torture. And that made a deep, deep impression. I learned about human evil for the first time. And I began writing poems about it. And I began lying, thinking, how would I withstand torture? If I was being tortured to tell about something, would I be able to withstand it or not? So it was a grim time.
So for today's world, what's the biggest threat of evil in today's world?
Well, probably what really upsets me in Palestine, in Gaza. I think that's just, I mean, so many children killed, thousands of them, bombed, destroyed. That has to be evil, doesn't it?
So what's the best solution or attitude towards evil?
Conquering it somehow. Go back to the Lord of the Rings. Sauron, the Dark Lord, and the orcs. It is really, it's almost like a whole scene of today. So we need, so we actually talk about this, when I'm talking about particularly the environmental problems of the world. And, there are people with the Jane Goodall Institute, with Roots and Shoots. And so I say, we've got to grow the fellowship. Lord of the Rings is Fellowship of the Ring. Well, we haven't got a ring, but we need to grow the fellowship to fight the Dark Lords. So I don't know what's going to happen, but I say to people sometimes when they say, well, I don't have hope, but I'll go on fighting anyway because, as I've always said, supposing there isn't any hope, which I really don't believe. I believe there is hope because I think we're beginning to wake up. But suppose there wasn't. Isn't it better to die fighting for what you believe in than just to give up and let your last days fade away and eat, drink and be merry, for tomorrow we die?
Because you said you liked the Lord of the Rings very much. So if you were in book, what kind of role you would play? Frodo or Sam or Gandalf? Which one you want to play?
I didn't ever want to play any. I just admired them or hated them, depending.
It's also about how people live in the dark times. So what do you get from the book? I mean, about courage, about maybe dilemma,
persistence, hope. I mean, Frodo and Sam attempted the impossible, and that's one of my reasons for hope. The people who attempt the impossible and are told that they're stupid, but they succeed.
Our literature experience shape your scientific discovery.
I don't know that it did. I mean, even as a little girl, I was out in nature watching birds and insects and squirrels and, loving to be out looking at the colors of the autumn tree and the little buds coming out in spring. And that tied in with poetry very much.
Who is your favorite poet?
Probably Keats.
Keats.
Yeah.
Lots about nature, about the birds,
I used to read Shakespeare all the time, and then poetry. I read a lot of poetry, and I loved it.
How does this kind of experience change your maybe scientific training?
Because I haven't had scientific training. I'm much more romantic than a scientist.
Yeah, actually, you are a romance-driven person, actually.
Scientific method, the way I use it's fine, but scientific method, being objective and cold, that's led to a lot of cruelty. Your animals are just subjects. I was told we were not part of the animal kingdom, we're separate. That's rubbish. When I was 10 years old, I'd loved animals all my life. And I read a book that made me dream of going to Africa, living with wild animals and writing books about them. And as I say, everybody laughed at me because I was just a girl. But here was the importance of my mother. She said to me, if you really want to do something like this, you're going to have to work really, really hard, take advantage of every opportunity. It wasn't easy. As I say, we didn't have much money. I was very good at school, but we didn't have money for university. I got a boring secretarial job in London, but I couldn't save money up in London. And so I went home. We lived on the south coast. And I got a job as a waitress. Jolly hard work. But it took 5 or 6 months until I'd saved up enough money for a fare to Africa. Anyway, to cut the long story short, I got to Africa. I met the famous paleontologist, Dr. Louis Leakey, and he offered me the opportunity to go and live with and learn from chimpanzees. Well, for the first 4 months, the chimpanzees ran away from me. So I think this is maybe one of the earliest times when hope was so important. And hope was realized by working very hard, getting up every day at 6 a.m., staying out in the fields, out in the forest, every day until darkness fell. And it was in this way that I gained the trust of the chimpanzees. And the most exciting thing that I then found out, how like us they are. They kiss, they embrace, they hold hands, they pat one another in reassurance. Males competing for dominance stand upright and swagger with furious scowls, shake their fist. Does that remind you of some human male politicians?
So empathy is part of our natural, but also we need to practice more and more.
Oh, we certainly, I mean, science has tried to crush it. That's led to so much cruelty. And like, you know, one of the things, before I visited Auschwitz, you know, one of the death camps, I was taken by a German friend who also wanted to visit Auschwitz because he couldn't understand how people, because he lived during the war too, he couldn't understand how people either didn't know or pretended not to know what was going on with these trains of people going to the death camps where he lived. And the thing he showed me that stayed with me forever, it was, I think it was Himmler who was in charge. And there's a letter that he wrote to the young men who were going in as Gestapo into the prisons as warders. And he said, "It is to be expected that some of you will show empathy for the prisoners. This must be stamped out immediately."
Yeah.
And they were trained that way. I mean, these young men, the you know, young Nazis, they had a 2-year training. And at the beginning, they were given a dog, a police dog, and told, take this dog everywhere. You've got to strongly bond with the dog. And so they came in for their final exam with the dog, who would become, you know, their best friend in these 2 years. And they were told, shoot your dog. And if they couldn't shoot the dog, they were out.
Wow.
So that shows you the kind of people who made it into the Gestapo.
So cruel.
Yes. Horrible. Horrible.
So
That's what I call evil. The difference between doing bad things because you're all roused up and angry and you just do it, or cold-bloodedly thinking, oh, we'll train people like this. That's evil. Chimps aren't capable of evil. We are.
So for you, what's the connection between human rights and animal rights?
Oh, it's much the same. Human rights, animal rights, they may be given rights, but they're violated all the time.
But someone will say you are too idealistic.
Well, you're very idealistic if you think, as some people do, that if I give animal rights, they'll be safe. That's very idealistic because there's ways around everything. It's not the law. I mean, yes, the law helps, but it's our feeling that matters.
So do you agree that someone said maybe some evil is inevitable?
No, I don't agree. Why should it be? No. Do you think that?
I'm not so sure about it, but
I mean, I think human beings are definitely capable of evil.
yeah.
But that's only if we get the situation better where there isn't a need for evil thoughts. I don't know it's inevitable. I think it's most likely because humans are flawed. Unless we get rid of this desire for money and power, then there will always be fighting. And when there's fighting, there will be evil, yes.
So what's the solution if more and more people become much more angry? The hatred is spreading around the world.
My solution is to get everybody involved in roots and shoots. No, but I'm serious because those people understand that we need peace. I mean, it's so stupid to be fighting over money and territory, and as long as you have enough, why must we always want more? More money, more territory, more land, more power.
From your early research, because you found that the chimpanzee can use tool, it made a huge impact on the definition of a human being. But now, through so much years, and see the different world, now how do you think about the human being now? What makes us different, special?
I think what makes us different is the explosive development of this intellect, which I personally think was at least in part triggered by our sudden, discovery that we could speak with words. So for the first time, we could tell children about things that weren't there. Chimps can't do that. They can demonstrate, they can model, but they can't tell chimpanzees about what happened last year. And so that, along with being able to plan for the future, remember the past, and most important, bring people from different skill sets to discuss a problem and try and find a solution. So I personally think that triggered our development of our intellect.
But sometimes, because you talk about a lot of hope, about commitment, but sometimes we choose the wrong direction. Maybe we don't know, but it's the wrong direction. We still so driving us to do it, but it's wrong. What should I do?
Well, I can't imagine doing that. So I can't tell you what I do because I cannot imagine charging off in the wrong direction. But I think a lot of people do. Young people do it because they see no other way of making a living. They hate what they do. Some are forced to join the army and they are told to kill and they hate it. And, a lot of young people get misled. And I always tell students, if you think you want to, for example, go out and study something in the field, and halfway through your degree you find you've made a mistake, don't be afraid to change. Don't get pushed into a life of doing something that you don't really care about. And that happens to a lot of students. On the other hand, there are students, particularly in Asia, especially Japan, and they've read my books. It's my fault. They've read my books. So they want to go in the field. And they're very passionate about it. But their parents and their teachers want them to go into business to make money. And they come to me in Japan crying and saying, you know, I really want to do it, but my parents don't want me to, and my teacher is pushing me. So what shall I do? So I say, well, don't go against your parents now. So do what they want you to do. Do it as well as you can. Try to succeed. In all your free time, you can still help animals on the environment. And then when you get to a certain age, you can drop what you're doing and do what you really want to do. It won't be too late.